While on vacation in London, a young woman posed in front of Tower Bridge with her father for a photo, hoping to capture a lovely family moment. But when she later took a closer look at the picture, she noticed something shocking and immediately began to panic. This one image would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The crisp morning air carried the scent of the River Thames as Elisha Ellie Gibson strolled along the Queen's Walk in Southwark, London. At 18 years old, Ellie was experiencing the vibrant city for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the sights alongside her father, Henry Gibson. They had just finished their morning walk and were heading back to their Airbnb apartment on Bermondsey Street. Ellie's gaze swept across the sparkling river, a contented smile playing on her lips. "Dad," she said, turning to Henry, "we should do more trips like this as a family. It's been amazing so far." Henry chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, sweetheart, we've pretty much emptied out our holiday savings jar for this one. If you want to plan another trip next year, you might need to cut back on that online shopping habit of yours." He winked teasingly. Ellie laughed, the sound light and carefree. "That sounds fair. I don't mind cutting down on shopping if it means we get to do this again with you and Mom." As they continued their leisurely pace, the iconic Tower Bridge came into view, its majestic structure framed against the bright blue sky. Ellie's attention was drawn to a man standing nearby with a sleek photo booth, the kind she'd often seen at her friends' weddings and events. The man, noticing their American accents, approached with a friendly smile. "Hello there. How about a lovely souvenir photo? My booth can print on magnetic surfaces instantly, and I'll throw in a digital copy too, only £9.99 for the both of you." Ellie's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, Dad, can we? It would be perfect to remember this day." Henry nodded, unable to resist his daughter's enthusiasm. "All right, let's do it." They posed together, Henry hugging Ellie from behind as they leaned against the iron railing near a lamppost. The Tower Bridge and the river provided a picturesque backdrop, capturing a sweet father-daughter moment. The photo booth whirred to life, quickly printing out the magnetic photo. Henry paid the man and accepted the print, but as he looked at it, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. He quickly tucked the picture into his pocket. "Can I see it, Dad? Did we look good?" Ellie asked, reaching for her phone as the cameraman offered to send the digital copy. "Let's head back now, sweetheart," Henry said, his tone slightly hurried. "We'll have a look at the apartment. Your mum's waiting, and we've been out since morning." As they made their way to the Airbnb, Ellie couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something about her father's reaction to the photo felt off. Did he not like it? Or was he hesitant to spend more money to take another shot? She chose to set those thoughts aside and focus on the excitement of exploring more of London with her parents. After all, if the photo turned out to be a disappointment, they could always return later to take more pictures, since their apartment was just a 5-minute walk away. They arrived at their apartment on Bermondsey Street, a cozy space that had become their temporary home for a week. Lisa Gibson, Ellie's mother, greeted them warmly as they entered. "How was the morning walk?" Lisa asked, having just finished tidying up their luggage. "Did you bring me some breakfast?" Henry produced a paper bag with a fresh croissant inside, placing it on the table. Ellie, still buzzing with excitement from their photo session, flopped onto the couch and pulled out her phone. Lisa noticed her daughter's enthusiasm and turned to Henry with a questioning look. "What's got her so excited?" "We took a picture together at Queen's Walk," Henry explained. "There was a man with a portable photo booth that printed a magnetic copy." From her spot on the couch, Ellie called out playfully, "Dad's being sneaky, keeping the magnetic copy to himself and leaving me with just the digital one." Henry retorted with a grin, "Hey, at least you have the digital copy to post on social media." "You know me too well, Dad," Ellie replied, already engrossed in her phone as she prepared to share their London adventure with her online friends. The cozy Airbnb apartment buzzed with the quiet energy of a family on vacation. Lisa savoured her croissant, while Ellie remained engrossed in her phone, carefully editing the photo for her social media post. Henry, ever the restless soul, glanced around the room with a slight frown. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "we've accumulated quite a bit of trash already. I think I'll take it down to the garbage chute and maybe get some fresh air while I'm at it." Lisa and Ellie nodded absently, both accustomed to Henry's need for the outdoors. Even back home in the US, he was rarely content to stay inside for long. As Henry gathered the trash and headed out, Ellie continued to work on her photo. She zoomed in, adjusting the contrast and brightness, when something caught her eye. In the background of their picture-perfect moment, a green trash bin stood out like a sore thumb. But it wasn't just the bin that drew her attention. Affixed to it was a missing person flyer. Squinting at the small image, Ellie could make out the face of a little girl. The words, "Still Missing," were boldly printed above the child's photo. A strange sense of familiarity washed over Ellie as she stared at the girl's face, but she couldn't quite place why. Shaking off the odd feeling, Ellie finished her edits and uploaded the photo to her social media account. As she hit post, her mother's voice broke through her concentration. "Ellie, honey, let's go. I'm done with breakfast," Lisa called out after finishing her meal. "You know how impatient your father gets when he's waiting." Ellie quickly tucked her phone into her purse and joined her mother. They exited the apartment, expecting to find Henry waiting in the hallway or lobby, but as they stepped outside, they realized he was nowhere to be seen. Surprisingly, neither Lisa nor Ellie felt particularly worried. They were well acquainted with Henry's tendency to wander off and reappear without warning. He was never a quiet man, after all. "He'll reach out when he's ready," Lisa said with a shrug, and they began to walk along the riverbank. As they strolled, retracing the path Ellie and Henry had taken earlier, they eventually found themselves back at the spot where the photo had been taken. The cameraman was still there, busy with other customers. And there, standing by the trash bin with the missing person flyer, was Henry. To Ellie's surprise, her father was in the process of removing the poster from the bin. She and Lisa approached him, curiosity piqued. "Dear, what are you doing?" Lisa asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Those bins are full of germs." But it was Ellie who voiced the question that had immediately sprung to mind. "Dad, why are you taking down that poster?" Henry's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment he seemed at a loss for words, but then a practiced smile spread across his face. "Oh, this," he said, his voice a touch too casual. "Some poor family must have put this up looking for their lost daughter. I didn't want you to see it and get upset. I know how sensitive you are about things like that." He chuckled nervously, folding the flyer and tucking it into his jacket's pocket. "It reminded me of those old news stories back in the States, the ones that always freaked you out as a kid. You used to have nightmares about kidnappings, remember?" Ellie frowned, a nagging feeling of unease settling in her stomach. Her father's explanation seemed odd, almost rehearsed. Why would he remove the flyer instead of just ignoring it? And how did he know about it before they did? But as Lisa fussed over Henry, pouring sanitizer on his hands and suggesting they continue their exploration of London, Ellie pushed her doubts aside. It was silly to overthink her father's actions, she told herself. He was probably just doing his random fatherly thing, being overprotective in his own peculiar way. Still, as they set off to discover more of the city, Ellie couldn't quite shake the image of the little girl's face from her mind. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of London as the Gibson family continued their exploration. The city's vibrant energy pulsed around them, and any earlier suspicions in Ellie's mind had subsided, replaced by the excitement of their adventure. Hours slipped by in a blur of sightseeing, each moment filled with laughter and wonder as they embraced the beauty of their surroundings. As the clock tower of Big Ben chimed 1 p.m., Henry's stomach growled. He checked his watch, the familiar gesture somehow seeming more deliberate than usual. "I'm getting hungry," he announced, his voice carrying a forced casualness. "Let's find a place to grab some food." While Henry and Lisa scanned the area, their eyes darting from one quaint cafe to another, Ellie trailed behind them. Her attention was fixed on her phone, the bright screen a stark contrast to the muted tones of the historic city around her. The notifications from her earlier post had exploded, a constant stream of likes and comments demanding her attention. As she scrolled, her thumb hovering over the screen, one particular comment made her heart skip a beat. It was from her best friend back home, the words jumping out at her. "OMG, Ellie! That girl in the missing person flyer looks so much like you. It's like seeing your mini-me." Ellie's steps faltered, her mind racing as she reread the comment. The playful tone of her friend's words did little to quell the unease growing in the pit of her stomach. She found herself staring at the photo again, her eyes drawn to the blurry image of the flyer in the background. The little girl's face, barely discernible in the low-resolution picture, seemed to stare back at her with an unsettling familiarity. "Ellie!" Henry's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and urgent. She looked up to see him gesturing towards a charming restaurant, its outdoor seating area adorned with colourful flowers. "How about this place? They have a nice outdoor seating area and it's just across Potter's Fields Park." Ellie nodded absently, forcing a smile as she followed her parents to a fancy table nestled against the building's weathered brick facade. The wrought-iron chairs scraped against the pavement as they settled in, the sound grating in Ellie's ears. As her mother perused the menu, her brow furrowed in concentration, Ellie remained engrossed in her phone. Her thumbs flew across the screen as she typed out a reply to her friend, each word carefully chosen to sound casual, to hide the tremor of uncertainty she felt. "Ellie," Henry called again, his voice laced with a concern that seemed oddly intense. "Is everything all right? What are you reading?" Startled by the urgency in his tone, Ellie quickly locked her phone and slipped it back into her purse. "Sorry, Dad, just got distracted," she mumbled, reaching for the menu. As they placed their orders with a cheerful waitress whose accent lilted musically, Ellie's mind kept drifting back to the missing person flyer. The nagging feeling of familiarity she'd experienced earlier had only intensified after reading her friend's comment. The clinking of cutlery against plates and the low hum of conversation from nearby tables faded into the background as Ellie struggled with her thoughts. The warm breeze that ruffled the tablecloth and carried the scent of freshly baked bread from the servers as they placed it on their table did little to ease her growing unease. "Dad?" she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the comfortable silence that had settled over their table. "Can I see that missing child flyer you took down earlier?" The effect of her words was immediate and alarming. Henry's fork clattered against his plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet corner of the restaurant. His face, previously relaxed in the afternoon sun, tightened visibly. "The flyer?" he repeated, his voice strained as if the words were being forced out. I'm not sure I have it anymore, honey. It must have slipped out of my pocket or blown away in the wind." Ellie frowned, her gaze sharp as she studied her father's face. She was certain she had seen him tuck the flyer safely into his navy blue jacket, the same jacket that now hung on the back of his chair. "But I saw you put it in your pocket," she insisted, her voice steady despite the tremor of doubt that ran through her. Henry's hand moved to his jacket, patting the pocket in a gesture that seemed more performative than genuine. "Sorry, darling. It's not there anymore." He added quickly, his words spilling out in a hurry. "It's probably for the best. You'd just get upset if you saw it." Lisa, who had been silently watching the exchange with her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, finally spoke up. "What's this about a flyer? I'm curious too." Her voice carried a hint of genuine confusion, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of, was it concern that mirrored Henry's? Henry waved his hand dismissively, the movement too broad, too emphatic. "It's nothing, really," he insisted, his gaze darting between Ellie and Lisa. "We shouldn't ruin our holiday mood over a piece of paper." But Ellie couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that her father was hiding something from her. He had been steering clear of any conversation about the flyer since that morning. The weight of unspoken words hung heavily in the air, as palpable as the aroma of their cooling meals. In an attempt to change the subject, to pierce through the tension that had descended upon them, Ellie asked, "Do either of you have any of my childhood photos on your phones?" The question, innocent as it seemed, caused Henry to tense visibly. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his napkin, his voice tight as he asked, "Why do you ask?" Ellie tried to keep her tone light, casual even as her heart raced. "Well," she began, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the condensation of her water glass, "I posted that picture we took together on social media, and my friends keep saying how similar I look to that little girl in the flyer, like I'm just the adult version of her." "That's nonsense," Henry said firmly, his words clipped and sharp. "Your mother and I raised you. You don't look anything like that girl." The vehemence in his tone took Ellie aback. She pressed on, adopting a playful tone that felt forced even to her own ears. "Come on, Dad. You must have at least one of my childhood photos on your phone. Can I see it, please?" Henry's expression tightened further, lines etching themselves deeply around his mouth and eyes. "I'm afraid not, sweetheart," he said, his voice softening in a way that felt rehearsed. "My phone memory was full, so I moved most of the files to our computer back home before the trip. I don't have any of your old pictures with me." Lisa nodded in agreement, her movement a beat too late to be entirely natural. "I don't have any on my phone either, dear." Disappointment washed over Ellie, mingled with a growing sense of doubt that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. Why did her father keep making excuses and avoiding the topic of the missing flyer? Why did a simple request for a childhood photo seem to sprout so much excuses? As she glanced around the restaurant, seeking a distraction from the discomfort that had settled over their table, her gaze landed on a figure across the street in Pottersfields Park. A woman, her movements purposeful and determined, was in the process of putting up a flyer, the same missing girl flyer her father had taken down earlier. "Look," Ellie said, pointing towards the park, "there's someone putting up more of those flyers." Henry and Lisa turned to look, their movements almost synchronized in their reluctance. As they watched the woman work, their faces paled visibly, the color draining away as if they had seen a ghost. As the woman turned, revealing her face fully, Henry suddenly broke into a coughing fit, his body shaking with the force of it. Lisa sat frozen, her eyes wide and unblinking, her fork suspended in mid-air. "Do you know her?" Ellie asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she noticed their strange reactions. "You both look like you've seen a ghost." "No," they answered in unison, their voices overlapping in a way that felt too rehearsed, too quick to be entirely truthful. At that moment their food arrived, the cheerful waitress oblivious to the tension that crackled between the three of them. As she set down their plates, the aroma of freshly prepared food wafting up to mingle with the scent of London's summer air, Ellie found herself unable to focus on the meal before her. "Let's eat," Henry said. "I'm starving. Ellie, if you want to take a picture, please do so now." Ellie stood up from her seat and positioned her phone above the meals. She snapped a picture of her dish, more out of habit than genuine interest, her mind racing with questions and suspicions. As she lowered her phone, she glanced back towards the park, but the woman had vanished as if she had never been there at all. The family ate in uncomfortable silence, the clink of cutlery against plates the only sound piercing the heavy quiet that had settled around them. As Ellie mechanically lifted forkfuls of food, her mind raced. The missing flyer, her parents' odd behavior, the woman in the park, all of it swirled together in a confusing maelstrom, as if there were some hidden meaning beneath it all. As the last remnants of their meal were cleared away, the tension at the Gibson family's table remained palpable. The cheerful bustle of the restaurant seemed at odds with the heavy silence that had settled over them, a stark reminder of the unspoken words and hidden truths that hung in the air. Ellie, still unsettled by the strange atmosphere that had descended upon their family outing, cleared her throat softly before asking, "Where should we go next?" Her voice sounded small and uncertain, even to her own ears. To her surprise, Henry suggested, his voice carrying a weariness that seemed out of place, "Why don't we head back to the Airbnb apartment?" Ellie couldn't hide her disbelief, her eyebrows arching high on her forehead. "Really, Dad? You want to go back to the apartment?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. It seemed entirely out of character for her father, who was usually the one pushing for more outdoor activities, always eager to explore and experience new things. Henry shrugged, a weary smile playing on his lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All this food is making me sleepy," he offered by way of explanation, his hand gesturing vaguely. "I'm not as young as I used to be, you know." The excuse rang hollow in Ellie's ears, but she nodded slowly, her mind racing to make sense of this latest oddity in a day filled with strange occurrences. They paid the bill, and as they rose from the table, Ellie couldn't help but notice how her parents seemed to move with an urgency that belied Henry's claim of tiredness. They set off towards their Airbnb apartment, a short 10-minute walk from the restaurant. The streets of London stretched before them, a tapestry of old and new, the city's rich history evident in every cobblestone and centuries-old building, but Ellie found herself unable to appreciate the sights around her, her mind too preoccupied with the growing list of questions that demanded answers. As they approached the apartment building, a familiar figure caught Ellie's attention. Her heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the woman from the park, now posting flyers just outside their building. The woman's movements were methodical, each flyer placed with care, her face a mask of determination tinged with a deep, abiding sadness. Without thinking, Ellie approached her, drawn by an inexplicable pull she couldn't quite understand. "I hope you find your missing girl, ma'am," she said softly, her hand reaching out to gently tap the woman's shoulder. The woman turned, her eyes widening in confusion as they met Ellie's. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Ellie felt a jolt of recognition, though she couldn't place why this stranger's face seemed so familiar, so important. Before Ellie could say anything more, she felt hands on her shoulders, pulling her back. Henry and Lisa had appeared beside her, their movements almost frantic as they ushered her into the building. Ellie stumbled slightly, caught off guard by their urgency. "What are you doing?" Lisa hissed, her voice low and strained as they entered the lobby. "You can't just approach strangers like that." Ellie opened her mouth to protest, to point out that she had merely been expressing sympathy, but the words died on her lips as she caught sight of her parents' faces. Fear, raw and unmistakable, was etched into every line of their features. They rode the elevator in silence, the soft ding of passing floors, the only sound breaking the tense quiet. Ellie's mind whirled, trying to make sense of her parents' reaction. It was as if they were afraid of something or someone. Once inside their unit, an uncomfortable silence settled over the family. Henry and Lisa moved about the space with an air of forced casualness, putting down their belongings and tidying up with movements that seemed too deliberate, too controlled. Henry shrugged off his jacket. He draped it over the sofa before unbuttoning the collar of his shirt beneath the jacket. "Your mother and I are going to rest for a bit," he announced, his voice carrying a forced lightness. "Maybe we can continue our sightseeing later in an hour." Before Ellie could respond, Henry and Lisa had disappeared into the bedroom, the door closing behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet of the apartment. Left alone in the living room, Ellie sank onto the couch, her mind racing. She unlocked her phone, scrolling through more comments on her post. The observations about her resemblance to the missing girl had only increased, each one sending a chill down her spine. She typed out a reply, trying to deflect attention with a joking emoticon. "You guys are missing the focus of the picture." But even as she hit send, she knew the lightness of her words was a poor mask for the turmoil she felt inside. As she set her phone down, her eyes fell on Henry's jacket, carelessly thrown over the arm of the sofa. It lay there, innocuous and unremarkable, and yet Ellie felt drawn to it, as if it held the answers to all the questions swirling in her mind. Almost without realizing what she was doing, Ellie found herself reaching for the jacket, her hands trembling slightly as they searched the pockets. Her breath caught in her throat as her fingers brushed against paper. The missing person flyer was still there, along with the magnetic photo print from that morning. Heart pounding, Ellie glanced towards her parents' closed bedroom door. She could hear the low murmur of their voices, though the words were indistinct. Knowing she had little time, she hurried to her own room, closing the door quietly behind her. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Ellie unfolded the flyer with trembling hands. The paper felt rough against her fingers, the weight of it somehow more significant than it should be. She ran her fingers over the printed image, taking in details she hadn't been able to see clearly in the low-resolution digital copy of her social media post. The little girl's face stared back at her, eyes wide and innocent, a smile frozen in time. But it was the date in small prints that caught Ellie's eye, making her gasp audibly. 2005. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. Not only did the girl look strikingly similar to her, but she would be exactly Ellie's age now. Ellie thought that if only she could find a picture from her childhood, it would confirm and ease her mind. Perhaps she was just overthinking the situation. As she considered where she might find the childhood photo, an idea struck her. With trembling hands, Ellie opened her social media app again, this time navigating to her father's profile. She scrolled through years of posts, each swipe revealing another layer of what she had always believed to be her life, until she reached the oldest ones. There, staring back at her from the screen, was a photo of herself from a few years after the age of the missing girl. Ellie's heart seemed to stop as she looked at it, really looked at it for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable, unmistakable. In that moment, as Ellie sat on her bed in a rented apartment in London, thousands of miles from the life she had always known, the foundations of her world began to crumble. Questions she had never considered before now demanded answers. Why was there a picture of her here in London, so far from the US, and why had her parents been acting so suspicious since the morning? Was there something they weren't telling her? Was there something she needed to know? With a determination born of desperation, Ellie snapped a close-up picture of the flyer with her phone. Her hands shook as she carefully folded the paper, creasing it along the same lines it had been before. She stepped out of her room, her movements cautious and deliberate. With utmost care, she returned the flyer to Henry's jacket pocket, arranging it exactly as she had found it. Each movement felt weighted with significance, as if she were handling not just a piece of paper, but a key to unlocking the truth of her existence. Ellie stood before her parents' bedroom door, one hand resting on the handle while the other hovered, ready to knock. She wanted answers, even if she suspected they would only provide more excuses, or perhaps even be angry with her for disturbing their rest. But just as her knuckles hovered inches from the wood, she heard muffled voices coming from within. Her hand froze and she found herself leaning closer, pressing her ear against the door. The cool surface of the wood contrasted sharply with the heat of her flushed cheek as she strained to make out the words being spoken on the other side. The muffled voices from behind the closed bedroom door grew clearer as Ellie pressed her ear against the cool wood, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might drown out the conversation within. But the words came through, each one a dagger to her heart, shattering the last remnants of the life she thought she knew. She keeps asking about that missing girl photo. Henry's voice, tinged with panic, reached her ears. The fear in his tone was palpable, a stark contrast to the confident, reassuring father she had always known. There's no way she could find out, right? Lisa's reply was softer but no less devastating. It's either we tell her, or one day she'll find out on her own. She'll hate us, Henry. The resignation in her voice spoke of a burden carried for far too long, a secret that had weighed heavily on her conscience. We've loved her enough, Henry insisted, his words carrying a desperate edge. She won't betray us. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken truths, and then Lisa's voice, heavy with the weight of a long-held secret. We kidnapped her, Henry. She would hate us. This holiday is a mistake. Coming back here to London, Henry replied. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the shocking truth hit Ellie. She felt her chest constrict, realizing she had been holding her breath. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the room spinning as the implications of what she had just heard crashed over her like a tidal wave. In her shock, Ellie stumbled slightly, her hand accidentally pushing against the door handle. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing Henry and Lisa, their faces masks of shock and horror, as they realized Ellie had been listening. Time seemed to stand still as they stared at each other, the truth hanging in the air between them like a physical presence. Ellie felt as if she were looking at strangers, the familiar features of her parents' faces suddenly alien and threatening. "Mom, Dad," Ellie's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. The words felt wrong in her mouth, a lie she had unknowingly been living for 18 years. "What were you talking about?" Henry's face paled, the color draining away as if he had seen a ghost. But even in his panic, he attempted to cover with another lie, his words stumbling out in a rush. We weren't talking about you, sweetheart. It was about the neighbor's child, But Ellie had reached her breaking point. Hours of doubt and confusion, culminating in this day of half-truths and evasions, finally boiled over. "Stop lying to me," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over to trace hot paths down her cheeks. "You've been lying all day, all hours. I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm not stupid. Just tell me the truth." The force of her outburst seemed to physically push Henry back. His shoulders sagged, defeat written across his features. "It was for your own good," he said weakly, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "We can explain everything." "You'd better," Ellie replied, her voice hard with anger and hurt. She crossed her arms over her chest, as if trying to hold herself together, as her world fell apart around her. Over the next hour, in halting, guilt-laden words, Henry and Lisa unraveled the tapestry of lies they had woven around Ellie's life. The living room of the Airbnb apartment became a confessional, the truth spilling out in a torrent of words that seemed to physically fill the space between them. They told her of that fateful day in Hyde Park, London, when she was just 3 years old, how they had stalked her family for days, planning the perfect moment to snatch her away. Each word was a blow, chipping away at the foundation of Ellie's identity. "It was a busy afternoon," Henry explained, his voice hollow, eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Ellie. "Your real parents were chatting with another couple. You were playing near a small ice cream stand." Lisa picked up the thread of the story, her eyes brimming with tears that she made no attempt to wipe away. "I pretended to trip and spill a drink near your parents. It was just enough of a distraction." "And I walked up to you," Henry continued, his gaze finally meeting Ellie's, the pain in his eyes matching the ache in her heart. "Promised to take you for ice cream. You were such a good girl, so trusting. You didn't resist at all." They spoke of fake documents hastily arranged, of a flight to the United States, of changing her name from Sarah Wells to Ellie Gibson, of building a life around a stolen child. Each revelation was another blow, dismantling the life Ellie had known piece by piece. As they talked, Ellie felt as if she were floating outside of herself, watching this scene play out from a distance. The apartment, which had felt cozy and familiar just hours ago, now seemed alien and threatening. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick and oppressive. "You're crazy," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You're criminals." Henry reached out as if to touch her, but Ellie flinched away. The movement, small as it was, spoke volumes. The trust that had once existed between them had been irreparably shattered. "We love you," Henry pleaded, his hand falling limply to his side. "These 18 years we've been a family. We've cared for you, provided for you. We always believed you'd have a better life with us." But Ellie was beyond consolation. The hurt and betrayal were too raw, too overwhelming. "Just because we lived as a family for a long time doesn't mean you're not child kidnappers," she spat, each word dripping with venom. "It doesn't mean we're really family." Lisa tried to interject, her voice quavering. "What do you mean, Ellie?" "We are family. We love each other. Family doesn't have to be blood relatives. There's so many—" But Ellie cut her off, her words sharp and final. "I loved you both, but now I don't want to be family with kidnappers who've been lying to me for 18 years. I'm going to the police station now, and I'm reporting you both." The color drained from Henry and Lisa's faces as the reality of the situation sank in. Panic flashed in Henry's eyes, and he took a step towards Ellie. "I'm afraid I can't let you go now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Ellie backed away, her eyes wide with disbelief. The man before her bore little resemblance to the loving father she had known. In his place stood a desperate criminal, cornered and unpredictable. "You're out of your mind," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just keep me here. You'll go to jail for this." But as she turned to flee the apartment, Henry's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "Yes, I can," he growled, his face contorted with a mixture of desperation and misguided love. "Because I love you too much to let you ruin our family." In that moment, As Ellie struggled against the iron grip of the man she had called father for 18 years, she realized that the life she had known was truly over. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The truth, long buried and hidden, had finally come to light, and its revelation would set in motion a chain of events that would alter the course of not just Ellie's life, but the lives of everyone involved in this tangled web of lies and stolen identity. The tension in the room was dense, thick enough to cut with a knife. Ellie's eyes darted between Henry and Lisa, searching for any sign of the loving parents she thought she knew. But all she saw were strangers, kidnappers who had stolen her life. The realization hit her anew with each passing second, each labored breath she took. "Let me go," Ellie cried, her voice raw with emotion. She struggled against Henry's grip, her free hand pushing against his chest. "I'm not your prisoner. You can't do this." Henry's face was a mask of determination and fear, his eyes wild with a desperation Ellie had never seen before. "We need to sit down and discuss this," he said, his voice strained, barely controlled. "We love you, Ellie. We didn't treat you like a prisoner. We can't let you throw away all the good things that we've built." The words that had once been comforting now rang hollow in Ellie's ears. Love. How could they claim to love her when everything had been built on a lie? The life they had created felt like a house of cards, and Ellie could sense it collapsing around her. And now they said she wasn't their prisoner. But what was a prison? Even the most beautiful house they had built for her still felt like a prison now, because they had taken her away from her real parents. Ellie's fear quickly turned to anger, a white-hot rage that burned through her veins. She lashed out, both physically and verbally. "I hate you!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face, leaving hot trails on her cheeks. "You're liars, child kidnappers." The words seemed to snap something in Henry. His hand rose, and before anyone could react, he slapped Ellie across the face with such force that her lip split, a trickle of blood running down her chin. The sound of the slap echoed in the suddenly silent room, a physical manifestation of the violence that had been done to Ellie's life. Ellie cried out in pain and shock, her hand flying to her stinging cheek. She tasted blood, metallic and warm on her tongue. Even Lisa gasped, frozen in horror at the scene unfolding before her. Taking advantage of Ellie's momentary stunned state, Henry roughly pulled her towards the bathroom. His grip was bruising, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. With a forceful shove, he pushed her inside and quickly locked the door. Ellie stumbled, catching herself on the sink. The cold porcelain beneath her hands was a stark contrast to the heat of her flushed skin. She spun around, pounding on the door with her fists. "Let me out!" she screamed, her voice hoarse with tears and fear. The small space of the bathroom seemed to close in on her, amplifying her panic. From the other side of the door, Henry's voice came, a mixture of anger and desperation. "This is your fault, Ellie. We just want to talk to you to find a solution. We love you so much. Everything we did was for your own good. We gave you the best life we could, the best education, the best attention and time. But you've disappointed us and made us angry now." The words, meant to justify their actions, only served to fuel Ellie's anger and fear. How could they claim that kidnapping her, lying to her for her entire life, was for her own good? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Ellie slid down to the floor, her back against the door, sobs racking her body. The taste of blood in her mouth was a stark reminder of how quickly her world had shattered. The cool tiles of the bathroom floor seeped through her clothes, chilling her to the bone, but she barely noticed. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and betrayal. Outside, she could hear Lisa's muffled cries and Henry's agitated pacing. The sounds of their distress, once something that would have concerned her, now only added to her own anguish. These people, whom she had loved and trusted implicitly, were now her captors. "If you don't calm down," Henry called through the door, his voice alternating between threatening and pleading, "we'll keep you locked in there, even for nights if we have to, until you come to your senses and apologized for calling us." The threat hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Ellie felt a chill run down her spine at the thought of being trapped in this small space for nights on end. She knew they were only in London for a week, and that they would eventually have to let her out of the bathroom, But even so, she feared she wouldn't find any escape from them once they returned to the US. Amid her fear, however, a spark of defiance ignited within her. "You'll go to jail for this," Ellie shouted back, her voice trembling but defiant. "You can't keep me here forever. This isn't home." As the reality of her situation sank in, Ellie's mind raced. She thought of her real parents, the ones she had never known, the woman she had seen putting up flyers. Could that have been her real mother? The thought brought a fresh wave of tears. What kind of life might she have had if she hadn't been stolen away? What experiences, what love, what truth had been denied her? In the living room, Henry's panic was escalating. Through the door, Ellie could hear him moving back and forth, his footsteps heavy and erratic. She imagined him running his hands through his hair, wiping his face repeatedly. Gestures she had seen 1,000 times before, but now imbued with a sinister new meaning. As Ellie sat trapped in the bathroom, her entire world turned upside down. She realized that her life would never be the same again. The future she had imagined for herself, college plans, career aspirations, relationships, all of it now seemed tainted, built on a foundation of lies. In the living room, Lisa stood frozen, silent tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched the man she had built a life with unravel before her eyes. The weight of their actions, the years of lies and deceit, seemed to press down on them all, filling the apartment with an almost tangible sense of dread and regret. Henry continued his frantic pacing, each step a testament to his growing panic. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet, a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos of his thoughts. Lisa stood rooted to the spot, her face a mask of anguish and indecision. Her eyes followed Henry's movements, darting occasionally to the closed bathroom door behind which Ellie was trapped. Suddenly, Lisa's resolve seemed to crumble. Without a word, she rushed to the kitchen, her movements jerky and desperate. The abruptness of her action barely registered with Henry, who was too absorbed in his own panic to notice her absence. In the kitchen, Lisa's trembling hands found the handle of a heavy cast-iron pan. She hefted it, feeling its weight, her mind racing with the enormity of what she was about to do. The cool metal against her palms grounded her, providing a focal point in the whirlwind of her thoughts. With the pan clutched tightly in her hands, Lisa stepped back into the living room. Henry had his back to her, still muttering to himself as he paced. The sight of him, the man she had loved, the father of the child they had stolen, filled her with a mixture of love, guilt, and resolve. Lisa raised the pan, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Henry must hear it. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into eternity as she steeled herself. In one swift motion, she brought the pan down on the back of Henry's head. There was a sickening thud, the sound reverberating through the room like a gunshot. Henry crumpled to the floor unconscious, his body hitting the ground with a dull thump that seemed to shake the very foundations of their life together. Lisa dropped the pan, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The heavy cookware clattered to the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence. For a moment she stood frozen, staring at Henry's prone form. The reality of what she had done crashed over her in waves, each one threatening to drown her in guilt and fear. Then, as if snapping out of a trance, she rushed to the bathroom door. Her hands shook violently as she fumbled with the lock, the metal cool and unyielding beneath her fingers. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to open it. Ellie, startled by the sudden intrusion, scrambled to her feet. She pressed herself against the far wall of the bathroom, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. The girl's face was pale, tear-stained, a vivid bruise blooming on her cheek where Henry had struck her. "Ellie," Lisa sobbed, reaching out but not daring to touch her. The space between them seemed vast, filled with years of lies and a betrayal too deep for words. "I'm so sorry for everything. I love you, but yeah, you need to go. Go to the police, report us. It's the only way out of this." Ellie stared at Lisa, her eyes searching the older woman's face. The fear in her expression was slowly replaced by confusion, then a wary sort of hope. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "Why are you helping me? Why now?" Lisa's face crumpled with guilt and sorrow. The weight of their actions, carried for so long, seemed to physically age her in that moment. "Because I know there were only two ways this could end," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Either this or your father would have hurt you or kept you locked up for the rest of your life. I love you too much to let that happen." Ellie's mind reeled, trying to process this sudden turn of events. Part of her wanted to lash out at Lisa, to scream and cry and demand answers for the years of lies. But another part, the part that still remembered the love and care she had received, felt a confusing mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Go," Lisa urged, stepping back to clear the way. Her eyes darted to Henry's unconscious form, a reminder of the urgency of the situation. "The police will help contact the US authorities. They'll keep you safe." For a moment, Ellie hesitated. Despite everything, the thought of turning in the people who had raised her, who she had loved as parents for 18 years, felt like a betrayal. The complexity of her emotions, love, hate, fear, gratitude, threatened to overwhelm her. Lisa seemed to sense her hesitation. "You deserve to know the truth, love," she said softly, her voice breaking on the endearment. "You deserve to set things right." Those words, spoken with such raw honesty, seemed to break through Ellie's paralysis. With a shaky nod, she moved past Lisa. The familiar scent of Lisa's perfume, once comforting, now made Ellie's stomach churn with conflicting emotions. Ellie paused only long enough to gather the evidence, the flyers, the photo print, before rushing out of the apartment. The door closed behind her with a soft click, the sound somehow final, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. As the door closed, Lisa sank to the floor beside the still unconscious Henry. She knew that their life as they knew it was over, but she couldn't bring herself to regret her final act. For the first time in 18 years, she had put Ellie's well-being above their own selfish desires. Outside, Ellie ran through the streets of London, her heart pounding and her mind racing. The city, which had seemed so exciting and full of possibility that morning, now felt alien and threatening. Every face she passed was a potential threat. Every corner, a possible hiding place for the secrets that had defined her life. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew she had to find the truth. About herself, about her past, and about the family she had never known. With each step, she was running not just away from the apartment and the life she had known, but towards a future that was terrifying in its uncertainty. The weight of the evidence in her hands, the flyers and the photo print, seemed to grow heavier with each step. These pieces of paper, so innocuous in appearance, held the key to unlocking her true identity. They were a bridge between the life she had lived and the one that had been stolen from her 18 years ago. As she ran, tears streaming down her face, Ellie made a silent promise to herself and to the little girl she had once been. She would uncover the whole truth, no matter how painful. She would reclaim her identity, her history, her very self, and somehow she would find a way to build a new life from the ashes of the old. The streets of London stretched before her, a labyrinth of possibilities and dangers. She barely noticed the curious glances from passers-by as she rushed past, her tear-stained face and disheveled appearance a stark contrast to the bustling city around her. Some turned to watch her go, concern or curiosity etched on their faces, but Ellie was oblivious to it all. Her mind was focused on a single goal, reaching the police station. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Ellie finally spotted the distinctive blue lamp that marked a police station. The sight of it brought a fresh wave of emotions, relief mingled with fear and uncertainty. When she finally burst through the doors of the station, Ellie was breathless and trembling. The sudden transition from the noise and chaos of the street to the quiet, orderly interior of the station was jarring. The fluorescent lights seemed harsh after the warm afternoon sun, casting everything in a stark, unforgiving glow. The officers on duty looked up in surprise as she approached the desk, clutching the missing person flyer in her shaking hands. Ellie was acutely aware of how she must appear. A young American girl, face bruised and tear-stained, clutching a handful of papers and looking utterly lost. I need to report myself and my parents," Ellie gasped, her voice quavering. She held out the flyer, her hand shaking so badly she could barely keep hold of it. "I'm this missing girl. The shock on the officers' faces quickly gave way to professional efficiency. They exchanged quick glances, years of training kicking in as they assessed the situation. One of them, a kind-faced woman with greying hair, stepped forward. "Come with me, love," she said gently, her voice carrying a soothing London accent. "Let's get you somewhere quiet where we can talk." They ushered Ellie into a private room, their movements gentle but purposeful. The room was small and sparsely furnished, with a table, a few chairs, and a large mirror on one wall that Ellie suspected was two-way. As she sank into a chair, the reality of what she was doing began to sink in. Over the next few hours, Ellie found herself recounting the story Henry had told her, about the kidnapping in Hyde Park, the hasty flight to America, the years of deception. The words poured out of her in a torrent, as if now that she had started she couldn't stop. She handed over the flyers and the photo, watching as the officers carefully bagged them as evidence. As she talked, Ellie felt as if she were describing someone else's life. The events seemed too fantastical, too cruel to be real. And yet, with each word, she felt the truth of it settling into her bones, reshaping her understanding of herself and the world around her. The officers listened attentively, their faces professional masks that betrayed little of what they were thinking. They asked questions gently but persistently, teasing out details that Ellie hadn't even realized she knew. With each answer, she felt as if she were dismantling the life she had known, piece by piece. "We'll need to collect your DNA," one of the officers explained kindly when Ellie had finished her story. His voice was gentle, but there was no mistaking the seriousness of the situation. "And we'll need to contact your real parents to come in for testing as well. It usually takes a day or two for results, but given the circumstances, we'll expedite the process." Ellie nodded numbly, her mind struggling to process everything that was happening. As she sat there waiting for the DNA swab, she couldn't help but wonder about her real parents. What were they like? Would they want her back after all these years? The thought brought a fresh wave of anxiety. She had spent her whole life longing for a truth she didn't know was missing, and now that it was within reach, she found herself almost afraid of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion outside the room. The door opened, and Ellie's heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the woman who entered, the same woman she had seen posting flyers outside the apartment. The woman's eyes widened in recognition, her hand flying to her mouth. "I knew it was you," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "I had the feeling when you talked to me earlier." Tears welled up in Ellie's eyes as the woman, her real mother, rushed forward, enveloping her in a tight embrace. The scent of her perfume, unfamiliar yet somehow right, enveloped Ellie. She found herself clinging to this stranger who was also her mother, years of loss and longing pouring out in racking sobs. A man followed close behind, his face a mixture of shock and joy. He hesitated for a moment, as if afraid to break the spell before joining the embrace. Ellie felt his strong arms encircle both her and her mother, and for a moment she allowed herself to be held by the parents she had never known. The police gently ushered them into a private room where they could talk. Through tears and broken sentences, Ellie's real parents introduced themselves as Nessa and Edric Wells. The names felt strange on Ellie's tongue, yet there was an undeniable rightness to them. "We lost you in Hyde Park," Nessa explained, her voice thick with emotion. Her hand never left Ellie's, as if afraid she might disappear again if she let go. "You were just 3 years old. We were chatting with another couple, and by the time we realized you were gone..." Edric picked up the story, his hand clasping Nessa's tightly. "We never even got a chance to see their faces. They vanished with you so quickly." The pain in his voice, still raw after all these years, made Ellie's heart ache, and as Ellie listened to their account, her heart ached for the years of separation, for the pain her disappearance must have caused them. But a small part of her couldn't help but think of Henry and Lisa, of the life she had known, the complexity of her emotions, love for the parents who had raised her warring with anger at their betrayal, longing for the parents she had never known, tempered by the strangeness of their presence, threatened to overwhelm her. "We've been searching for you all these years," Edric continued, his voice breaking. "This was our last ad campaign. We spent our last bit of savings on these flyers. If we hadn't found you now—" His voice trailed off, the unspoken what-if hanging heavily in the air. Ellie felt the weight of those years, the relentless hope that had driven her parents to keep searching long after others might have given up. The police officer gently interjected, reminding them that while he believed their story, there were still legal procedures to follow. "We need to collect DNA from all of you," he explained, his tone apologetic but firm. "It's only through DNA confirmation that we can officially process this case." Ellie nodded, understanding the necessity but feeling a strange mix of emotions. As she watched the forensic team take DNA samples from her and her real parents, she couldn't help but feel like she was straddling two worlds, the life she had known and the one she was just discovering. As they waited for the expedited results, Ellie found herself studying Nessa and Edric's faces, searching for similarities, for some tangible connection to her true identity. The love and hope in their eyes was unmistakable, but Ellie felt a pang of guilt for the conflicting emotions swirling within her. She knew that whatever the DNA results showed, her life would never be the same. The family she had known for 18 years was built on a lie, but they had given her love, even if it was founded on deceit. And now, sitting across from the parents she had never known, Ellie realized that the road ahead would be long and complex. The police station hummed with a quiet intensity, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the small room where Ellie sat with Nessa and Edric Wells. The air was thick with tension and unspoken emotions, each person lost in their own thoughts as they waited for news. Ellie's gaze flitted between her newfound parents, still struggling to reconcile their familiar yet strange faces. Edric paced the small confines of the room, his movements restless and agitated. Every few minutes he would pause, open his mouth as if to speak, then think better of it and resume his pacing. As the minutes ticked by, feeling more like hours, Ellie found her mind wandering back to the apartment she had fled. What had happened after she left? Was Henry still unconscious? Had Lisa called the police herself? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a constant undercurrent to the tumultuous emotions roiling within her. A soft knock at the door startled them all. A police officer entered, his face carefully neutral. "We've received some preliminary results," he announced, his voice low and measured. "They confirm a familial match between Miss Gibson, or rather Miss Wells, and Mr. and Mrs. Wells." The words hung in the air for a moment before their impact fully registered. Nessa's grip on Ellie's hand tightened, a small gasp escaping her lips. Edric stopped his pacing abruptly, turning to face the officer with wide eyes. "However," the officer continued, his tone cautious, "there's been a development at the apartment where Miss Wells was staying. The individuals she identified as her kidnappers have been taken into custody." Ellie felt her heart skip a beat. "Taken into custody," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You mean they've been arrested?" The officer nodded solemnly. "They're being processed now. Given the nature of the allegations and the international aspects of the case, it's a complex situation. But yes, they're under arrest." A maelstrom of emotions swept through Ellie: relief, fear, anger, and a surprising pang of concern for the only parents she had ever known. Can I see them?" she asked, surprising even herself with the request. "Please." The officer hesitated, glancing between Ellie and the Wells. "It's not standard procedure," he began, but something in Ellie's expression made him pause. "But given the unique circumstances, I'll see what I can do." As the officer left to make arrangements, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Nessa and Edric exchanged worried glances, clearly unsure how to react to Ellie's request. "Ellie," Nessa began hesitantly, "are you sure you want to see them? After everything they've done?" Ellie took a deep breath, trying to sort through the jumble of her thoughts. "I know it doesn't make sense," she said slowly, "but for 18 years they were my parents. I need to see them, to understand." Edric moved closer, kneeling beside Ellie's chair. "We understand," he said softly, though the pain in his eyes belied his words. "This isn't easy for any of us, but we're here for you no matter what." The sincerity in his voice, The unconditional support offered by these virtual strangers who were her true family brought fresh tears to Ellie's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. When the officer returned, he led them through a maze of corridors to a viewing area outside the booking room. Through a large window, Ellie could see the processing area where suspects were photographed and fingerprinted, and there, looking small and defeated, were Henry and Lisa. Ellie's breath caught in her throat as she watched them being processed. Henry's face was a mask of anguish, his eyes red-rimmed and unfocused. Lisa seemed to be in a state of shock, her movements mechanical as she followed the officer's instructions. As if sensing her presence, both Henry and Lisa looked up, their eyes meeting Ellie's through the glass. The moment stretched, laden with unspoken words and a lifetime of complicated emotions. Lisa broke first, her composure crumbling as she began to cry. "Ellie," she called out, her voice muffled by the glass but still audible. "We're so sorry, we surrender. We never meant for it to end like this." Henry nodded, his own eyes filling with tears. "We love you," he said, his voice breaking. "We always have, everything we did. It was because we loved you too much." Ellie felt her own tears spill over, hot trails down her cheeks. She pressed her hand against the glass, a gesture somewhere between a farewell and a plea for understanding. As Henry and Lisa were led away, disappearing from view, Ellie wondered if she could ever fully recover from this revelation. A part of her yearned to maintain some relationship with Lisa, who had ultimately saved her from captivity. But Ellie didn't know if she could ever forgive Lisa and Henry for what they had done, or how she could live with herself if she did. For a brief moment, Ellie considered leaving everyone behind and starting her life anew, free from the complications of her past. Sensing her turmoil, Nessa and Edric gently told her, "It's okay, Ellie. We understand this isn't easy. Take all the time you need. Knowing that you're safe is enough for us. We couldn't ask for more than seeing how you've grown into such a beautiful, strong woman." Ellie nodded, grateful for their understanding. "It will take me some time," she admitted. "I don't know how long. This trip to London was supposed to be a family holiday with Henry and Lisa. We'd been saving for so long for this European trip. We had so many plans, not just for England, but for when we got back home too. Seeing it all crumble in one day. It's not easy." Nessa and Edric exchanged a look of compassion. "Take as much time as you need," Edric said softly. "Even if you want to keep staying in the USA, that's okay with us. You don't have to move to London." Ellie felt a rush of emotion at their words. "I still love them," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Henry and Lisa. Even now I love them, and I wish I could just hate them instead. I feel terrible for still caring about them." "It's not bad," Nessa reassured her, reaching out to touch Ellie's arm gently. "It's normal. It means you were happy that they cared for you." Ellie nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "There's still so much to process. I hope I can build a bond with you both over time. I'm glad the lies are over now, at least." Nessa reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. She handed it to Ellie, who saw a baby version of herself smiling at the camera. "You were born here in London," Nessa explained, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where your home is, and it will always be open to you if you ever decide to come." Ellie felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she said sincerely, looking at both Nessa and Edric. They exchanged contact information, promises to stay in touch hanging in the air between them. A police officer approached, gently interrupting the moment. "Miss Wells, we need to arrange for your stay here. Since you're 18, you don't need a legal guardian, but we should discuss your options." As they followed the officer to another room, Ellie found herself reflecting on how her family holiday had turned out. Just this morning, she had been a carefree American teenager on a family holiday, excited about capturing memories with a street photographer's camera. Now she stood at the threshold of a new life, her identity in flux, caught between two sets of parents and two versions of herself. The weight of the truth was heavy, but it also brought with it a sense of liberation. For the first time, Ellie felt she could see the world, and herself clearly. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges she could scarcely imagine, but also rich with possibilities. As she stepped into the room where her immediate future would be decided, Ellie realized that while the life she had known had ended, a new one was just beginning. And in that moment, despite the pain and confusion, she felt a flicker of excitement for what lay ahead.